Greetings and salutations. We're going to be beginning chapter 3. We're going to start off with paragraph 15. I'm going to get started. There are two things which are incompatible with one another: productive activity and the simultaneous contemplation of it. This is recognized even in Genesis chapter 1 verse 31. Here God creates the world in the first 6 days, and only when it is there any contemplation of it possible. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. The same applies to our thinking. It must be there first, if we would observe it. And the summary that we have is our thinking must first be there if we are to observe it. I think in the last session I was talking a lot about how we need to, the reason why we can't observe ourselves thinking and the afterthoughts of thinking is just that it's very difficult. So we have to recognize that they're two separate acts, and he goes on about that for a few paragraphs, so I'm going to just kind of go by them quickly because he does repeat himself in this. So if you get that idea, basically that thinking and then observing your thinking are two separate acts, then you should be fine. Paragraph 16. The reason why it is impossible to observe thinking in the actual moment of its occurrence is the very one which makes it possible for us to know it more immediately and more intimately than any other process in the world. Just because it is our own creation, do we know the characteristic features of its course, the manner in which the process takes place. What in all other spheres of observation can be found only indirectly, namely the relevant context and the relationship between the individual objects, is in the case of thinking known to us in an absolutely direct way. I do not on the face of it know why, from my observation, thunder follows lightning, but I know directly from the very content of these two concepts why my thinking connects the concept of thunder with the concept of lightning. It does not matter in the least whether I have the right concepts of lightning and thunder. The connection between those concepts that I do have is clear to me, and this through the very concepts themselves. And the summary for that is, we know the characteristics of the course of our own thinking and how it occurs because it is we who create it. So as he says here, we know thinking more immediately and more intimately than any other process in the world, simply because we create it. And so we all know what it's like when we create something. We all know that. We know it very well, and there's a certain bond that we have and a certain connection to it. So it's the same thing. We create our own thinking, and that is the reason why it is impossible to observe it thinking in the actual moment of its occurrence. But we can also know it very well because it's our own creation. So paragraph 17. This transparent clearness concerning our thinking process is quite independent of our knowledge of the physiological basis of thinking. Here I am speaking of thinking insofar as we know it from our observation of our own spiritual activity. How one material process in my brain causes or influences another while I am carrying out a thinking operation is quite irrelevant. What I observe about thinking is not what process in my brain connects the concept lightning with the concept thunder, but what causes me to bring the two concepts into a particular relationship. My observation shows me that in linking one thought with another, there is nothing to guide me but the content of my thoughts. I am not guided by any material processes in my brain. In a less materialistic age than our own, this remark would of course be entirely superfluous. Today, however, when there are people who believe that once we know what matter is, we shall also know how it thinks, we do have to insist that one may talk about thinking without trespassing on the domain of brain physiology. Many people find it today difficult to grasp the concept of thinking in its purity, Anyone who challenges the description of thinking which I have given here by quoting Cambanus' statement that the brain secretes thoughts as the liver does gall, or the spittle glands spittle, simply does not know what I am talking about. He tries to find thinking by a process of mere observation in the same way that we proceed in the case of other objects that make up the world. But he cannot find it in this way, because, as I have shown, it eludes just this ordinary observation. Whoever cannot transcend materialism lacks the ability to bring about the exceptional condition I have described, in which he becomes conscious of what in all other spiritual activity remains unconscious. If someone is not willing to take this standpoint, then one can no more discuss thinking with him than one can discuss color with a blind man. But in any case, he must not imagine that we regard physiological processes as thinking. He fails to explain thinking because he simply does not see it. And the summary for 17 is, observation of my spiritual activity shows that linking one thought with another is guided only by the control of my thoughts and not by any material process in my brain. I think in the American translation of this book, it's called Intuitive Thinking, a Spiritual Activity, and for Steiner, thinking isn't just about, you know, chemical A and chemical B and that's all what's going on. I mean, it's not about that. That's just sort of the after effects, like that's the result of thinking. It's not necessarily that's why we think, because it's just simply chemical processes going on. For Steiner, thinking is an actual spiritual process, and that's why he named this book that, because it is a spiritual activity, and that's important for people reading this book to understand, because it's not just about the material processes that are going on in my brain as I'm thinking. That's just, like I said before, that's just the effects and whatnot. And I think he's, in this paragraph, he's trying to state that we do live in a very materialistic age, so that's also a reason why a lot of people might find it difficult to grasp, because he also wants us to grasp thinking in our purity. And if we just look at thinking as a purely materialistic process, then that's not thinking in its purity. It's thinking, so to speak, contaminated by materialistic thinking. So that's what I want you guys to understand with paragraph 17. Just let me, and also as well, when you see one thought and you make another observation, what guides you to make those connections, again, is your thinking. You can have one concept of something, and then, again, like he mentions, with you can see lightning and you see thunder. Well, you don't see thunder, you hear thunder, but you have these concepts of these things, and then the thinking is what connects them, that, oh, they work, they come together, they're part of this process of a storm. So it's thinking that guides you to make the connections in things in life. That's one example. We'll move on to paragraph 18. Actually, no, we're going to just stop it here because it's going to be 10 minutes. So I will see you next time. And hopefully happy thinking. That's all I'm going to say. Bye.